Have you ever really stopped to think about what you're made of? I mean, really. If you zoom in way past the skin and bone, what you find is, well, it's a universe, a bustling collection of trillions of tiny living units. Today, we're exploring that fundamental building block of life, the cell. Think of it as a microscopic metropolis that literally makes you, you.
So to understand this city, we first have to understand the world it lives in. And that world, it's mostly water. Get this, a full 60% of your body weight is just H2O. Now that's not just some random fact, it's the literal ocean where every single process of life happens.
But here's where it gets really interesting. That water isn't just one giant pool. Nope. About 2/3 of it, that's 40% of your total body weight, is actually locked inside your cells. We call that the intracellular fluid, or ICF. The other third, or 20%, is on the outside, bathing the cells. That's the extracellular fluid, or ECF. Right there, that creates this fundamental division, the world inside the cell and the world outside of it.
So what is it that keeps these two very different worlds apart? Well, let's zoom in on a single cell, right to its edge, its city limits. This is where we find one of the most incredible structures in your entire body, the cell membrane.
Now, don't think of the cell membrane as just some passive wall. It's this incredible, elastic, and here's the key word, semi-permeable barrier. And that word, semi-permeable, is everything. It means the membrane is a super smart, super selective gatekeeper. It's constantly deciding what gets in and what stays out. And in doing so, it creates a totally unique world on the inside.
And I mean a completely different world. The whole point of this smart border is to build and protect an internal environment that is radically different from the fluid it's floating in. This difference, this separation, it's not just important, it's the very basis of life itself.
And you can see just how different it is when you look at the residence, the charged ions. Inside the cell, it is packed, and I mean packed, with potassium and proteins. But the second you step across that border into the outside fluid, whoa! Suddenly you're in a world that's dominated by sodium and chloride. It's like two neighboring cities with completely different populations and cultures separated by one very, very smart wall.
So, you have to be asking, how does this wall do so much? Well, it's not just brick and mortar. Embedded all throughout the membrane are these highly specialized proteins. You can think of them as all the advanced systems built right into the city walls, and they give the membrane all of its amazing powers.
These proteins are basically the Swiss Army knives of the cell. They handle 6 critical jobs. First, they provide structural support. They're the rebar in the foundation of the wall. Second, they form passive channels. Think of them as open gateways that let specific things just flow right through. Then you've got pumps. These are like powered ferries, using energy to haul cargo against the current. They also act as receptors, which are like the city's communication towers, picking up signals from the outside world. Some are enzymes, little on-site factories that get chemical reactions done right there at the border. And finally, they create connections, literally building bridges to link up with neighboring cell cities. It's just an incredibly dynamic system.
Okay, so now that we know what the border is and all the cool things it can do, let's get to the main event. How does stuff actually get from the outside world to the inside and from the inside out? How is all this traffic actually regulated?
Yeah, that's the crucial question, right? If the inside and outside are so different, there have to be some very specific rules for crossing the border. And it turns out, there are 5 major ways to get things across.
All right, the first 2 methods are all about just going with the flow. It's a natural process called diffusion, which basically means things moving from a crowded place to a less crowded one. The easiest way is simple diffusion, where really tiny stuff can just slip right through the membrane, no problem. But bigger molecules, they need an escort. They use a special protein helper to get across, and we call that facilitated diffusion.
Now, because facilitated diffusion relies on these protein escorts, it's got some rules. For one, it can get saturated. If all the carrier proteins are busy, a traffic jam forms at the gate and the transport just can't go any faster. It's also vulnerable to something called competitive inhibition. That's where a molecule that looks similar can cut in line and steal the carrier's attention, blocking the real molecule from getting its ride.
But what if a cell needs to move something against the crowd? What if it needs to pull something in from an area where there isn't much of it to an area where there's already a lot? That's like trying to push a boulder uphill. And for that, the cell needs a special process called active transport.
And just like pushing that boulder uphill, this takes work.
Active transport has 3 non-negotiable requirements. It needs a specific carrier protein to do the lifting, a helpful enzyme to make it happen smoothly, and the most important ingredient of all, energy. It has to spend energy to get the job done.
And the undisputed rock star of active transport is the sodium-potassium pump. This thing is one of the hardest workers in your entire body. It is constantly burning energy to pump sodium out and potassium in, fighting against the flow to maintain that crucial ion difference we saw earlier. This one process is absolutely essential for pretty much everything, from your nerves firing to your muscles contracting. Our fourth method is a special one, just for water. It's called osmosis. This is simply the passive movement of water across the membrane. Water always wants to move toward an area that has more stuff dissolved in it, to try and even things out. It sounds simple, but this process is vital for making sure our cells don't shrink up like raisins or, worse, burst like a water balloon. So what about the really big stuff? Cargo that's way too big to fit through any channel or carrier. For these heavy-duty jobs, the cell uses vesicular transport. The membrane itself literally reaches out and engulfs the large substance, wrapping it in a little bubble or vesicle and pulling it inside. It's the cell's own personal shipping and receiving department.
So we've gone through all this microscopic traffic. Ions being pumped, water flowing, molecules getting escorted across the border. But why does any of this tiny stuff matter? Well, because this constant, controlled, incredibly precise traffic across trillions of cell membranes, that is the unseen engine that powers everything you are and everything you do.
It all comes back to this one simple but totally profound truth. The cell is the basic unit of the body. Every single thought you have, every heartbeat, every movement you make, it's all the result of these tiny cities working together in perfect harmony. The health of the entire nation of you depends on the health of every last one of your cellular citizens.